I remember the smell of my mother's cooking, the exact blend of spices in her signature stew, when I crushed a heretic's skull with my ceramite fist. My name is Brother-Sergeant Matthias Kaine of the Crimson Herald's 4th Company, and I remember everything. Every birthday, every friend's name, every moment I spent as Marcus Thorne before the apothecarian carved me into something else. You think that makes me weak, that memories are chains holding me back from the Emperor's work. But you don't know what it's like to watch your brothers charge into battle with empty eyes, while yours still hold the weight of a mother's last words. The Codex Astartes says we must forget. Hypno-indoctrination is designed to wipe us clean. For 99.9% of my brothers, it works perfectly. I am the exception, and that exception might doom us all. Chapter 1. The Boy Who Wouldn't Break. The neural conditioning chamber smelled like ozone and human fear. I was 14 standard years old, strapped to a surgical throne, while servitor attendants calibrated the psycho-indoctrination protocols for my 97th session. 96 times they'd tried to erase Marcus Thorne. 96 times I'd walked out with his memories intact, buried beneath layers of tactical doctrine and imperial catechism. But still there, still me. Apothecary Hadron stood over me, his augmetic eye whirring as it focused on my pupil dilation. Subject Delta 7-3 demonstrates continued resistance to standard memory suppression protocols, he said into his data slate. His voice carried no emotion, which was ironic considering he was trying to steal mine. Recommend escalation to theta-level indoctrination. I didn't respond. I'd learned early that showing fear only made them more aggressive. Instead, I focused on the memory of my little sister Arya's laugh, the way it sounded like bells when I'd tickle her sides. I held that laugh like a shield while the machines hummed to life. The pain was indescribable. They say hypno-indoctrination doesn't hurt, that it's just information being written over old patterns. They're lying. Every attempt felt like someone driving hot needles through my skull while simultaneously drowning me in ice water. I felt the machines trying to find Marcus, trying to delete him, file by file, memory by memory. They reached for my mother first. They always went for family bonds, and I felt her image flicker. But then something strange happened. The more they pushed, the harder Marcus pushed back. Not consciously, not something I could control. It was like my mind had learned to root around the indoctrination, to hide pieces of itself in neural pathways the machines couldn't reach. While the apothecary poured in battle liturgies and weapon maintenance protocols, Marcus simply moved, shifted, became deeper. When the session ended, I recited the expected responses perfectly. I am a weapon of the Emperor. I know no fear. My past is dust before his glory. The words came automatically now, a second language that I spoke while thinking in my first. Hadron seemed satisfied. Subject shows appropriate verbal conditioning. Proceed to physical augmentation phase. Begin with osmodular implantation. The augmentation surgeries were worse than the indoctrination. They started with my bones, injecting the osmodular that would make them grow and harden over the next 2 years. I remember lying in the recovery cell, feeling my skeleton ache as it began to change, and thinking about the time I'd broken my arm falling from old man Gregor's apple tree. I was 9. Marcus was 9. The arm had healed in 6 weeks. Now my bones would never break the same way again. Next came the Biscopea, the muscle-building implant that would turn me from a scrawny 14-year-old into something that could tear a man in half. The pain of rapid muscle growth was constant, unending. I'd wake up screaming as my shoulders broadened, as my chest expanded, as everything that had been Marcus's body was rebuilt into something else, but I never forgot what I'd looked like before. I could still picture the mole on my left shoulder blade, even after the new muscle covered it completely. The other aspirants didn't seem to suffer the way I did. I watched them in the training halls between surgeries, and they moved like they'd been born to it. No hesitation, no confusion about who they were becoming. They'd forgotten their old names within weeks of arriving at the fortress monastery. When I asked Brother Aspirant Kaine if he remembered his family, he looked at me like I'd spoken in Xenos tongue. Family, he'd said, genuinely puzzled. I have brothers here. I need no other family. That was when I realized I was alone in a way that went beyond physical isolation. Every other aspirant had successfully transitioned from civilian child to Proto-Astartes. Their past lives had been cleanly erased, replaced with purpose and doctrine, but I carried both. Marcus Thorne walked beside Brother Aspirant Delta 7-3, invisible to everyone but me. The training regime was designed to break us further, to eliminate any remaining traces of civilian weakness. We fought until we bled, studied until we collapsed, drilled until every movement became pure muscle memory. I excelled because Marcus had always been stubborn, and that stubbornness translated well into Astartes' determination. When they ordered us to run 50 kilometers in full combat gear, I remembered Marcus running messages through the streets of Hive Tertius for 3 copper coins per delivery. The money had fed Arya for a week. That memory gave me strength even as my enhanced muscles screamed. But the memories also made things harder. When they put a practice blade in my hand and told me to kill the servitor target, I hesitated just for a millisecond. Just long enough to remember that servitors were people once, that they had names and families, and maybe little sisters who laughed like bells. The hesitation cost me a disciplinary beating that left me unconscious for 2 days. Sergeant Instructor Mordus stood over me in the medical bay afterward. Whatever weakness you're clinging to, aspirant, purge it. Hesitation kills brothers. Sentiment kills brothers. Only the Emperor's will matters. Yes, Sergeant Instructor, I said. And I meant it. But Marcus whispered beneath the words, but what if the Emperor's will forgets that we were human first? By the time I was 16, I'd received 11 of the 19 organs that would make me a full Space Marine. The secondary heartbeat in my chest alongside my original. The catalepsian node meant I no longer dreamed, or rather, I no longer needed to dream to rest. But I did anyway, because Marcus's memories played out behind my eyelids, whether the node wanted them to or not. I saw my father's funeral, Arya's first day at the Skolum, my mother crying when the recruitment officers came. The other aspirants were changing too, but differently. They were becoming perfect weapons. I was becoming something else. A weapon that remembered what it meant to be a tool, that understood on a visceral level what humanity would lose if we failed. I didn't know if that made me stronger or weaker. I just knew I was different. When I finally received my black carapace at 19 and was declared ready for the final trials, Apothecary Hadron pulled me aside. His augmetic eyes studied me with what might have been concern. Your neural architecture is unusual, Brother Aspirant, he said carefully. The hypno-indoctrination has taken in terms of skill acquisition and combat doctrine, but your baseline personality patterns show abnormal persistence. This is either a critical flaw or a unique adaptation. The trials will determine which. I nodded, saying nothing. What could I say? That Marcus Thorne refused to die, that every memory made me more determined to protect the Imperium because I knew exactly what we were fighting for. The trials would come, and I would pass them, not in spite of my memories, but because of them. Chapter 2. Trials of the Unforgotten. The trial of the blade took place in the Underspire, 17 levels below the fortress monastery, where the darkness was absolute and the only sound was your own breathing. They gave us each a combat knife and a single objective: survive 3 days while being hunted by fully trained battle brothers. I descended into the darkness with 4 other aspirants. Within the first hour, I heard the screams of Brother Aspirant Kaine being eliminated. The hunting party moved like ghosts, and I remembered Marcus hiding from gang enforcers in the Underhive tunnels, pressing his body into crevices so small they seemed impossible. That childhood fear translated perfectly into Astartes' stealth training. On the second day, I found Brother Aspirant Thorne, they'd given him my original surname by coincidence, bleeding out from a leg wound. He'd been caught by Brother-Sergeant Vaughn's hunting pack and left to test his endurance. I could have passed by. Should have passed by. The trial was individual survival, but Marcus remembered helping a wounded dock worker who'd been beaten by Habgangers. He remembered his mother's voice. "We're only human if we help each other, Marcus. The moment we stop, we're just animals." I doubled back and dragged Thorn to a defensible position. I used my knife to cauterize his wound, the smell of burning flesh mixing with the stale underspire air, and split my water ration with him. He looked at me with confusion in his eyes. "Why?" he rasped. "We're supposed to prove individual strength." "Astartes fight as brothers," I said. "This proves I understand that." We both survived the 3 days. When we emerged, bloody and exhausted, Chapter Master Hadrius himself stood waiting. His storm grey armor was polished to a mirror sheen, and his bionic eye matched the one in his skull. "Delta 7-3, he said, his voice like grinding tank treads. "You diverted from your trial to assist another aspirant." "Yes, Chapter Master. Explain your reasoning." "Explain. I could have lied. Could have cited tactical doctrine about force multiplication or unit cohesion. Instead, Marcus spoke. "Because he would have died alone, sir, and no one should die alone if there's someone who can prevent it." The silence stretched for 10 heartbeats. Then Hadrius nodded. "An acceptable rationale. Proceed to the trial of fire." The trial of fire was exactly what it sounded like. They locked us in the thermal chamber and raised the temperature to levels that would cook an unaugmented human in minutes. We had to remain conscious and functional for 1 hour while the heat climbed to 200 degrees Celsius. The heat was crushing. I felt my sweat evaporate before it could form. My secondary heart kicked in, working overtime to keep blood flowing to my brain. But worse than the physical pain was the memory of Marcus, age 7, accidentally touching the hot stove and screaming as his palm blistered. That child's terror tried to overwhelm the Astartes conditioning. I made it 43 minutes before I started hallucinating. I saw my mother in the flames, reaching for me. Saw Arya burning, screaming my name. The visions were so real that I actually moved toward them before my training kicked in. "They're not real," I told myself. Marcus's memories being weaponized by heat stress. Ignore them. But I couldn't ignore them. Instead, I did something different. I accepted them. Let them exist while also functioning through them. I acknowledged that yes, Marcus had known pain and fear and loss, and that didn't make me weaker. It made me understand what was worth enduring this hell to protect. I completed the hour. So did 3 others. The trial of darkness came next. They injected us with a toxin that shut down our catalepsian nodes and forced us into REM sleep, then monitored what we dreamed. Most aspirants, their minds wiped clean of personal history, dreamed of battle and glory and the Emperor. Simple dreams, pure dreams. I dreamed of my mother's death. She'd been caught in a hab block collapse during a gang war. I was 12. The building came down in sections, crushing civilians who couldn't afford to live in the reinforced upper levels. I dug through rubble for 6 hours before I found her. She was still alive, barely, trapped under a support beam that had crushed her legs. "Marcus," she'd whispered, her hand trembling as it found mine. "Promise me you'll watch over Arya. Promise me you'll be strong for her." "I promise, Mom. I promise." She died while I held her hand. I felt the moment her pulse stopped. In the dream state of the trial, I relived every second. The apothecaries monitoring my vitals must have seen my stress levels spike through their instruments, but I passed the trial by not breaking, by holding my mother's hand one more time and letting myself grieve, while my Astartes body remained steady. When they pulled me out of the induced sleep, Apothecary Hadron was there again. "Your neurological patterns during the trial were highly irregular," he said. "You experienced significant emotional trauma but maintained physiological stability. Explain." "I remembered something that mattered," I said, "and it didn't break me because I've already survived it once." Hadron studied me for a long moment. "Your psycho-indoctrination failure may prove to be a feature rather than a flaw, aspirant, or it may doom you. Time will tell." The final trial was the trial of the chapter. They gave each of us a scenario, and asked us to make a decision that revealed our core character. Mine was simple. A civilian population stands between you and a critical objective. They will slow your advance by precious minutes. Do you go through them or around them? The correct codex answer was, evaluate whether the objective's tactical importance outweighs the civilian casualties. Pure calculation. But I thought of Marcus's hive, of the thousands of people who worked themselves to death in manufactorums they'd never escape, who loved and laughed and feared and hoped, despite lives that offered them almost nothing. I thought of Arya, who would be 17 now, who might be in a crowd just like the hypothetical one in the scenario. I go around them, I said. The Emperor protects humanity. If we murder humanity to protect humanity, we've already lost. Sergeant Instructor Mordus looked like he wanted to fail me on the spot. But Chapter Master Hadrius held up a hand. Explain the tactical justification for your choice. Dead civilians breed resentment, sir. Resentment breeds heresy. Heresy breeds chaos. A few minutes of delay is preferable to creating future enemies. It was true, but it wasn't the real reason. The real reason was Marcus, who couldn't bear the thought of being the boot that crushed people who'd done nothing wrong. Hadrius nodded slowly. An acceptable tactical rationale that happens to align with an ethical position. You are dismissed, aspirant. I passed all 4 trials. So did 7 others out of 33 who began them. We knelt in the Chapel of Heroes while Chapter Master Hadrius himself performed the ceremony. You have proven yourselves worthy of the honor of becoming Adeptus Astartes, he intoned. You have cast aside your old names and old lives. You are reborn in the Emperor's light. When he asked for my chosen name, I spoke clearly. Tarkus Valen, Chapter Master, in honor of the hero who saved my original hive from Orc invasion. What I didn't say was that Tarkus Valen had also stopped to help wounded civilians during that battle, earning him a reprimand from his captain, but eternal gratitude from the hive's population. I chose the name because it represented what I hoped to be, a warrior who never forgot what he was fighting for. The other aspirants chose names like Ironhand, Bloodletter, Siegebreaker, names that spoke of violence and strength. Only my name carried memory. As we rose as Scout Marines, as brothers of the Crimson Heralds, I felt the weight of my decision. I was keeping Marcus alive in a place designed to kill him. Every day would be a battle to maintain that balance. But I'd made a promise to my mother, to be strong, and I'd keep it, even if no one else remembered she'd ever existed. Chapter 3. The Weight of Brotherhood. My first deployment came 6 months after being inducted into the Scout Company. We were assigned to the industrial world of Ferrum's Reach, where heretic cultists had seized 3 major manufactorums and were corrupting the worker population. The mission was simple: eliminate the cult leadership, minimize civilian casualties, restore imperial control. Sergeant Kavros led our scout squad of 8 brothers. He was a veteran of 60 years, his face a roadmap of scars, and his eyes completely devoid of doubt. When he looked at us during the mission briefing, he saw weapons he'd been given to complete an objective. Nothing more. The cultists have entrenched themselves in Manufactorum Theta 7, he explained, pointing at the hollow projection. 200 heretics, 400 civilian hostages. Standard protocol. Identify cult leaders, execute precision strikes, accept up to 15% civilian casualties as acceptable losses during the assault. 15%. That meant 60 people who'd done nothing wrong except be in the wrong place when madness took hold. 60 mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters. 60 people who'd had names before they became statistics. I raised my hand. Kavros's eyes narrowed. Brother Valen. Sergeant, request permission to suggest an alternative approach. Denied. We execute as planned. Sergeant, the civilian workers have family in the surrounding Habs. If we kill 60 of them, we radicalize 600 more. We turn a localized cult into a recruitment tool. The other scouts shifted uncomfortably. You didn't question your sergeant, especially not as a fresh scout barely out of trials. But Marcus remembered the Hab gangs in the Underhive. remembered how every death created 10 new vengeful recruits. Kavros stood and walked over to me. He was nearly 3 meters tall in his scout armor, and he leaned down until his scarred face filled my vision. Brother Valen, you speak as if these civilians matter more than the mission objective. No, Sergeant. I speak as if the mission objective includes the long-term stability of Imperial control. For 5 long seconds, I thought he'd strike me. Then he straightened. You have 30 seconds to outline your alternative. I stood and approached the holo projection, highlighting key sections. The manufacturum ventilation system connects to the underhive tunnels here, here, and here. If we infiltrate through these points, we can position brothers at the cult leaders' locations simultaneously. Kill shots within the same 10-second window. The cultists lose their command structure instantly, and most will surrender. And if they don't surrender? Brother Scout Paris asked. He was one of my trial mates, and his voice carried genuine curiosity rather than challenge. Then we've still minimized civilian casualties while maximizing heretic death toll. The Emperor's enemies destroyed, his people preserved. Sergeant Kavros studied the projection. I could see him running calculations, weighing tactical variables. Finally, he nodded. Acceptable modification. We execute Valen's approach. But if it fails, Brother Valen, you will personally deliver the Emperor's mercy to any cultists who survive. Understood. Yes, Sergeant. The infiltration went exactly as planned. The underhive tunnels stank of chemical runoff and human waste, smells that brought back vivid memories of Marcus's childhood. I led the way, my smaller scout frame perfect for the tight spaces, and found each ventilation access point exactly where the schematics showed them. We emerged inside the manufacturum simultaneously, 8 shadows among the machinery. Through my prey sight, I identified the cult leaders. 3 men and 1 woman, each marked by ritual scarification and standing on elevated platforms where they could preach to their followers. Targets acquired, Kavros voxed. Execute on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. 4 bolt pistol rounds fired simultaneously. 4 cult leaders died before their brains could register the sound. The effect on the cultists was immediate and catastrophic. Without their leaders' voices filling the air with heretical scripture, the civilians who'd been enslaved by rhetoric suddenly remembered fear. This is Sergeant Kavros of the Crimson Heralds, his voice boomed across the Manufactorum Vox system. Your false prophets are dead. Drop your weapons and kneel, and the Emperor's mercy will be swift. Resist, and his justice will be total. 3/4 of the cultists dropped their weapons immediately. The remaining 50 or so, the true believers with chaos symbols carved into their flesh, chose to fight. The close-quarters battle was brutal and efficient. We moved through the manufacturum like precision instruments, each shot calculated to avoid civilian casualties while eliminating heretic threats. Brother Scout Pyrrhus took a last round to the shoulder, but fought on, his enhanced physiology already clotting the wound. I personally killed 7 cultists who were attempting to execute hostages in a final act of spite. The last cultist I faced was young, maybe 19 standard years. His eyes were wild with whatever chemical cocktail the cult leaders had been feeding them, and he held a crying child against his chest with a knife at her throat. "Stay back!" he screamed. "Stay back or I kill her! Your corpse emperor can't protect her from me!" I could have shot him. My marksmanship training was perfect, and I could have put a bolt round through his eye socket at this distance without endangering the child. But Marcus saw something in the cultist's face. Terror beneath the bravado, the desperate fear of someone who'd believed a lie and was now trapped in its consequences. "Brother, lower your weapon," I said quietly. "You don't want to hurt that child." "I'm not your brother," he spat. "I serve the true powers. You serve nothing," I interrupted, keeping my voice calm. "The people who told you lies are dead. You're free now. You can put down the knife and walk away." "There's no walking away from you." "Yes, there is." I lowered my bolt pistol, the move going against every tactical instinct. "I'm putting down my weapon. See, now put down yours. Let the child go. We'll talk." Sergeant Kavros's voice hissed in my vox speed. "Valen, "What are you doing?" I ignored him. The cultist's hand was shaking, the knife drawing a thin line of blood on the child's throat. She couldn't have been more than 7, Arya's age when I'd been taken. "My name is Marcus," I said, using the name I wasn't supposed to remember. "I grew up in Hive Tertius. My mother died in a hab collapse, and I had a little sister who looked a lot like that girl you're holding. She used to laugh like bells. What was your mother's name?" The question broke through his conditioning. His eyes focused on me for the first time, really focused, and I saw the human being beneath the heretic. "Elena," he whispered. "My mother's name was Elena." "Elena would want you to let the girl go," I said gently. "She'd want you to be better than the monsters who lied to you." The knife clattered to the floor. The cultist dropped to his knees, sobbing, and the child ran to her mother's arms. I walked forward, picked up the knife, and handed it to Sergeant Kavros. "One more heretic neutralized, Sergeant." Kavros looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "That was tactically unsound, Scout Valen. But effective, Sergeant. But effective," he agreed quietly. The mission was a complete success. 0 civilian casualties, 178 cultists eliminated, 22 captured for interrogation. Chapter Master Hadrius himself reviewed the mission report and commended Sergeant Kavros for his tactical flexibility. But afterward, in the quiet of the strike cruiser's chapel, Sergeant Kavros found me kneeling before the Emperor's shrine. "You remembered a name you shouldn't have," he said without preamble. I didn't deny it. "Yes, Sergeant. And you used it to save a life." "Yes, Sergeant." He knelt beside me, his massive frame somehow making the gesture look natural. "I've been an Astartes for 6 decades, Brother Valen. I don't remember my original name, don't remember my family, don't remember anything before the fortress monastery. Most of my brothers would say that makes us pure, weapons without the burden of humanity." "Yes, Sergeant, but today I watched you talk down a heretic by reminding him of his humanity, by showing him yours." He paused. "The Codex Astartes says we must transcend our origins to serve the Emperor. But what if remembering our origins makes us better servants?" I turned to look at him. His scarred face showed no emotion, but his eyes held something I'd never seen before: doubt. "I don't know, Sergeant." "Neither do I, brother. Neither do I." We knelt in silence for a long time after that. 2 Space Marines wrestling with questions that had no easy answers. The successful mission earned me and my squad mates our full power armor and promotion to full battle brothers. We underwent the final augmentation surgeries, receiving the implants that would allow us to interface with the sacred armor. When they bolted the ceramite plates onto my flesh for the first time, I felt Marcus Thorne disappear further beneath layers of inhuman enhancement. But I also felt him growing stronger. Every memory became a foundation stone for the warrior I was becoming. When I took my final oaths as Brother-Sergeant Tarkus Valen of the 4th Company, Tactical Squad Primus, I spoke the words with complete sincerity. "I am the Emperor's will made manifest. I am his sword and his shield. I know no fear, for I am fear incarnate to his enemies." And beneath those words, Marcus whispered, "I remember being afraid. I remember everyone I'm fighting to protect. And that makes me stronger, not weaker." The question was whether my brothers would ever agree. Chapter 4. When Memory Becomes Heresy. The crisis began in the war-torn world of Khalistan Prime, 7 years into my service as a full battle brother. We'd been deployed to lift a 6-month siege by a warband of the Black Legion, and the fighting was the worst I'd experienced. Chaos Space Marines were different from cultists. They were us, but broken. Twisted reflections of what an Astartes could become if he abandoned the Emperor. My squad was holding the western defensive line when I saw him. A Chaos Marine in corroded power armor, his shoulder pauldron still bearing the faded colors of the Silver Skulls chapter beneath layers of warp corruption. He moved with the same tactical precision we did, every action speaking of training identical to mine. We clashed in the ruins of a basilica. He swung a chain axe at my head, and I caught it on my power sword, the weapons shrieking as they ground against each other. We were perfectly matched. Same training, same augmentation, same tactical doctrine. "You fight like a puppet," he snarled through his vox grill. "Mindless, obedient. Do you even remember why you fight?" "For the Emperor," I replied, driving a knee into his abdomen. "For humanity." "Lies!" He shoved me back with inhuman strength. "They took your memories, your identity, your soul, and made you into a thing. I was like you once. Then I remembered. He attacked with renewed fury, but there was something wrong about his movements. They were precise but desperate, skilled but chaotic, like a man drowning who still remembered how to swim. "You were a silver skull," I said, parrying his strikes. "You betrayed your brothers." "I freed myself from their chains, and you could too, loyalist. Remember who you were before they made you into this." The words hit harder than his blade, because I did remember. I remembered Marcus Thorne. I remembered his mother and sister, and the streets of Hive Tertius. I remembered everything the Chaos Marine had apparently lost and found again. But I also remembered my mother's voice. "We're only human if we help each other." This traitor had remembered his humanity and decided to serve the ruinous powers. He'd taken the gift of memory and perverted it into justification for damnation. He was everything I feared I might become. "I do remember," I said quietly, and saw his eyes widen behind his helmet. "I remember my name, my family, everything they tried to take from me. But remembering doesn't mean betraying. It means understanding what I'm protecting." I killed him with a thrust through his primary heart. As he died, he laughed. "You remember? Then you're already corrupted. You just don't know it yet." His words haunted me through the rest of the campaign. We broke the siege, drove the Black Legion back into the warp, and returned to the fortress monastery as heroes. But I couldn't shake the traitor's final accusation. Was I corrupted? Was the retention of my pre-Astartes memories a flaw, a vulnerability that would eventually lead me to fall? The Codex Astartes existed for a reason. The psycho-indoctrination was designed to eliminate exactly this kind of doubt. I requested an audience with Chapter Master Hadrius. He granted it immediately, which surprised me. Chapter Masters didn't usually meet with common battle brothers unless something was seriously wrong. His sanctum was austere, decorated only with battle honors and a single purity seal that predated the chapter's founding. He sat behind a desk made from the hull of an orc gargant he'd personally destroyed, and his storm-grey eyes studied me with the intensity of a plasma cutter. "Brother-Sergeant Valen, you requested this audience. Speak." I told him everything. About Marcus Thorne, about the memories that wouldn't fade, about the hypno-indoctrination failures and how I'd learned to hide them, about the traitor Silver Skull and his final words. When I finished, I expected execution, exile, censure at minimum. Instead, Hadrius leaned back in his chair. "You think you're the first?" he asked. "Chapter Master, you think you're the first Crimson Herald to retain memories from before the augmentation?" He stood and walked to a locked cabinet, entering a security code that took 15 seconds to input. From inside, he withdrew a data slate. "I've been Chapter Master for 120 years. In that time, I've identified 17 battle brothers who showed signs of retained pre-Astartes memory." My world tilted. 17. 16 of them eventually lost those memories as their service continued. The neural patterns faded, overwritten by decades of combat experience and hypno-conditioning. They became normal. He handed me the data slate. "The 17th is you." I looked at the slate. It contained psychological evaluations, mission reports, behavioral analyses, all documenting subtle signs of retained humanity in brothers who served before me. Some had decades of loyal service. Others had died in battle, their secrets intact. "None of them fell to chaos," Hadrius continued. "None betrayed their oaths. If anything, they showed higher rates of mission success in operations requiring interaction with civilian populations." He paused. "But they all caused concern. made their superiors uncomfortable, raised questions about whether the Codex Astartes was being violated. What happened to them? 6 died in combat. Heroically, I might add. 10 eventually lost their memories naturally. The 16th. He gestured to himself. The shock must have shown on my face. Hadrius smiled grimly. I was born Matthias Corvus, 3rd son of a merchant family on Decimus 7th. I remember my father teaching me to read. My mother's name was Helena. I had 4 sisters. He said each fact like a catechism. I am 153 years old, and I remember all of it. How? The question came out as a whisper, the same way you do. Something in our neural architecture resists the psycho-indoctrination. Not enough to prevent us from becoming Astartes, but enough to preserve the core of who we were. He took the data slate back and locked it away. The question isn't why we remember, brother. It's what we do with those memories. The traitor on Khalistan said I was corrupted. The traitor was a fool who mistook memory for absolution. He remembered his humanity and decided that meant he was free to reject his duty. We remember our humanity and understand exactly why that duty matters. Hadrius placed a hand on my shoulder, a gesture of brotherhood I'd never expected from a chapter master. You are not corrupted, Brother Valen. You are uniquely qualified. For what? To be what this chapter needs most. A warrior who never forgets why we fight. Over the next 3 months, Hadrius took me into his confidence in ways that violated about 40 different sections of the Codex Astartes. He showed me classified reports about other chapters, other brothers who retained memories. The salamanders had higher rates of memory retention than most. Some scholars theorized it was related to their genocide stability. The space wolves were nearly all memory retainers in some form, though their chapter culture embraced it rather than suppressing it. But most chapters viewed retained memory as a flaw, a sign of weak indoctrination, of potential corruption. The Black Templars reportedly executed aspirants who showed memory retention. The Marines Malevolent used them as frontline fodder, burning through their defective brothers in suicidal assaults. We do neither, Hadrius explained. The Crimson Heralds take a middle path. We don't celebrate retained memory like the Wolves, but we don't eliminate it like the Templars. We watch, we evaluate, and if a brother proves he can carry both identities without corruption, we use that strength. Use it how? He showed me. My next assignments were all operations requiring careful civilian interaction. Negotiating with planetary governors who didn't trust Astartes. Coordinating with Imperial Guard units who needed more than tactical doctrine. Investigating potential heresy while minimizing collateral damage. In every case, Marcus's memories gave me an edge. I could read human emotion in ways my brothers couldn't. Could anticipate civilian reactions, predict social dynamics, understand the complex motivations that drove people to heroism or heresy. I became the chapter's specialist in what Hadrius called human interfacing operations, but it also isolated me further. My battle brothers respected my effectiveness, but didn't understand it. When I suggested modifying tactics to reduce civilian casualties, they saw it as wasteful sentiment. When I took time to learn local customs and names, they saw it as mission inefficiency. Only Sergeant Kavros, who'd commanded my scout squad, seemed to understand. He'd been promoted to company command, and during a campaign planning session, he openly supported one of my suggestions. Brother Valen's approach on Ferrum's Reach resulted in 0 civilian casualties and 100% mission success, he said. Perhaps we should consider his tactical modifications more seriously. Captain Drusus, our company commander, wasn't convinced. Sergeant Kavros, civilian casualties are an accepted variable in the Codex Astartes. We cannot allow sentiment to compromise mission efficiency. With respect, Captain, it's not sentiment. It's understanding that civilian populations are strategic assets, not collateral damage. Dead civilians create resentment. Resentment breeds heresy. Heresy breeds chaos. Brother Valen's methods eliminate heretics while preserving imperial loyalty. The captain studied me with barely concealed suspicion. Brother Valen, Do you retain memories from before your ascension? The room went silent. Every brother present knew what the question meant. An accusation of defective indoctrination, a challenge to my loyalty. I could have lied, should have lied, but Marcus had never been a good liar, and neither was I. Yes, Captain. The silence deepened. I could feel the weight of their judgment. Brothers I'd fought beside for years, suddenly seeing me as something other, something wrong. Captain Drusus stood. Then you will submit to immediate psycho-indoctrination revision. We will correct this irregularity. No, Chapter Master Hadrius said from the doorway. We'd all been so focused on the confrontation that none of us had heard him enter. Brother Valen will continue his service as is. Chapter Master, the Codex. I am aware of what the Codex Astartes states, Captain. I am also aware that Brother Valen has served for 7 years with distinction, that his mission success rate exceeds company average by 23%, and that his supposed defect has proven to be an asset in 16 separate operations. Hadrius walked to the front of the room. The Codex Astartes is a guideline, not a prison. The Emperor made us to be weapons, yes, but effective weapons adapt to their targets. If we allow one brother to retain civilian memories, what prevents others from claiming the same privilege? Drusus challenged. How do we prevent this from becoming an excuse for weakness? By evaluating results over theory, Brother Valen's results speak for themselves. The captain clearly wanted to argue further, but couldn't contradict the chapter master. The meeting adjourned with uncomfortable tension hanging in the air. Afterward, Hadrius pulled me aside. You've been exposed, brother. Some will accept it. Others will view you with suspicion until the day you die. Are you prepared for that? I don't have a choice, chapter master. The memories are part of me. We always have choices. You could still undergo revision. We could try to erase Marcus Thorne permanently. I thought about my mother's final words, about Arya's laugh, about every memory that made me who I was. No, sir, I won't erase them. They make me better at what I do. Then you'll need to prove that, repeatedly, to every brother who doubts you. He placed both hands on my shoulders. But you won't be alone. I'll ensure that. You have my word as chapter master and as one who remembers. The oath sustained me in the years that followed. But the damage was done. I was marked now, identified as defective by brothers who would never trust me fully again. The question became, how long could I maintain the balance before something broke? Chapter 5. The Battle for Brothers. The break came on the shrine world of Sanctus Dominus, 12 years into my service as a battle brother. We'd been deployed to defend the Cathedral of St. Celestine from a massive orc. Wah! And the fighting had raged for 3 weeks straight. The orcs just kept coming, wave after wave of green-skinned Xenos, with no fear and no tactical sophistication beyond charge toward the enemy and kill. My squad, Tactical Squad Primus, held the cathedral's southern approach alongside 2 other squads from our company. We'd killed thousands of orcs, but they'd managed to break through the outer defensive line and flood the Pilgrim District, a warren of habitation blocks surrounding the cathedral, where 70,000 civilians sheltered. Captain Drusus's orders were clear. All squads fall back to the cathedral proper. We establish a defensive perimeter at the primary entrance and hold until reinforcements arrive. The pilgrims in the outer districts are on their own, 70,000 people. Left to be slaughtered because the tactical calculus said we couldn't spread our forces thin enough to protect both them and the cathedral. Pure Codex doctrine. Mathematically correct. Strategically sound. Marcus Thorne wanted to vomit. Acknowledged, Captain, I voxed. Then I switched to my squad channel. Brothers, movement to rally point, combat speed. We bounded back through the war-torn streets, our ceramite boots crushing rubble that had been shops and homes just days ago. I could hear the orcs behind us, their bestial roars mixing with the screams of civilians they caught in their advance. We reached the rally point, an intersection 500 meters from the cathedral. The other squads were already there, Brother-Sergeant Pyrrhus and Brother-Sergeant Karos, each commanding 9 battle brothers. 30 Space Marines total, falling back while 70,000 humans died. I made a decision that could end my career, or my life. Brother Sergeants, I'm breaking off from the retreat, I announced on the command channel. I'm taking my squad to evacuate as many civilians as possible from the Pilgrim District. Brother Valen, that directly contradicts Captain Drusus's orders, Pyrrhus said carefully. I'm aware. You'll be committing tactical disobedience, potentially insubordination. I'm aware of that too. The Codex Astartes says we protect the Imperium, I interrupted. The Imperium isn't buildings and relics. It's people. 70,000 people who came here to show their faith, who trusted that the Emperor's angels would protect them. Silence on the Vox. I could almost hear the calculations running through my brothers' minds. Duty versus compassion. Orders versus conscience. The machine versus the man. Brother Sergeant Karos spoke first. How would you execute this evacuation? I pulled up the tactical map. The Pilgrim District has 3 main arterial roads. If we establish firing positions at the intersections, we can funnel civilians toward the cathedral while holding back the Orc advance. Textbook crowd control combined with defensive warfare. And when Captain Drusus demands to know why we disobeyed direct orders, then I'll face whatever consequences alone. Your squads can claim you were following my command override as the senior sergeant present. It was a lie. Karos had 3 more years of service than me, but it would give them deniability. Pyrrhus laughed, a sound like grinding ceramite. Brother Valen, you're either the most foolish Space Marine I've ever served with, or the most faithful. Tactical Squad Secundus will support your insane plan. As will Tactical Squad Tertius, Karos added. But Valen, when we face the captain's wrath, you're standing in front. Understood and accepted. Now move out before there's no one left to save. We split into 3 groups, each taking one of the arterial roads. My squad secured the western approach, setting up heavy bolters at the intersection and preparing to hold against whatever the Orcs threw at us. The civilians came in a terrified flood. Entire families, pilgrims in religious robes now torn and blood-stained, children being carried by parents who looked like they'd already died inside but kept running anyway. They saw us, 10 Space Marines in crimson armor standing between them and death, and some of them actually cried with relief. "Keep moving!" I shouted through my helmet's Vox amplifier. "Follow the road to the cathedral! The Emperor protects!" Then the Orcs arrived. The first wave hit us like a green tsunami. Orc boys wielding crude choppers and sluggers, driven by the momentum of their wah energy into a frothing berserker rage. We met them with precise bolter fire, each shot calculated to maximize devastation while creating a wall of Orc corpses that would slow the advance. "Controlled bursts," I commanded. "Maintain fire discipline, we're buying time, not body count." Brother Nemes took point with our squad's flamer, turning the intersection into an inferno that incinerated Orcs by the dozen. Brother Thelios worked the heavy bolter with mechanical precision, each burst cutting down 3 or 4 Xenos. The rest of us provided supporting fire, our bolters speaking the Emperor's judgment in a rhythmic thunder. The Orcs kept coming. For every 10 we killed, 20 more appeared. But the civilians kept running too, streaming past our position in a desperate exodus. I kept one eye on the tactical display, watching the crowd density slowly decrease as more people reached the cathedral's safety. An Orc knob broke through our fire line, a massive brute wielding a power claw and wearing armor made from looted Imperial tank plates. It charged straight at Brother Thelios, clearly recognizing the heavy weapon as the primary threat. I intercepted it, my power sword meeting its claw in a shower of sparks. The knob was strong, probably strong enough to match my enhanced physiology, but it fought with pure aggression while I fought with technique refined over 12 years of constant warfare. I ducked under its wild swing, used its momentum against it, and drove my blade up through the gap in its makeshift armor. The power field cut through Xeno's flesh like it wasn't there. The knob died with a confused grunt, probably surprised that something could be faster than its rage. Good kill, Sergeant, Brother Nemes called out. Save the celebration for after we're done, I shot back. The battle raged for 2 hours. 2 hours of constant combat while thousands of civilians fled past us. My armor's power supply dropped to 30%. Our ammunition reserves hit critical levels. Brother Thelios took a slugger round to the shoulder that cracked his pauldron but didn't penetrate. Brother Corvius's bolter jammed, and he resorted to using it as a club to smash orc skulls. Then Captain Drusus's voice erupted over the command channel. All tactical squads, report status immediately. I checked the tactical display. The civilian density in the Pilgrim District had dropped to near zero. We'd done it. Not everyone had made it, but we'd saved tens of thousands who would have otherwise died. Tactical Squad Primus reporting, Captain. Position: Pilgrim District Western Arterial. Status: engaged with Orc forces, covering civilian evacuation. You were ordered to fall back to the cathedral. Apologies, Captain. I misinterpreted the order to mean we should ensure the cathedral had a population worth defending. The silence on the Vox was so profound, I could hear my own heartbeat through my armor's audio dampening. All squads, disengage and fall back immediately. We will discuss this later. We disengaged in textbook fashion, using leapfrog retreat tactics to maintain fire superiority while withdrawing to the cathedral. The orcs pursued but couldn't match our coordinated movement. By the time we reached the cathedral's primary entrance, we'd broken contact with minimal casualties. The refugees we'd saved lined the cathedral's interior, 70,000 terrified, exhausted, grateful humans who stared at us like we were the Emperor incarnate. An elderly priest approached me, his hands shaking as he reached up to touch my armor. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for remembering we exist." I nodded, unable to speak. Marcus was screaming with joy inside my skull while Tarkus Valen prepared to face the consequences of tactical disobedience. Captain Drusus met us in the tactical command center. His face was a mask of controlled fury. Chapter Master Hadrius stood beside him, and his expression was unreadable. "Brother-Sergeant Valen," Drusus said formally, "you directly contradicted my explicit orders. You endangered 3 tactical squads by dividing our defensive formation. You prioritized civilian evacuation over securing a critical strategic objective. Explain yourself." I removed my helmet, letting them see my face. "Captain, I believed that saving 70,000 Imperial citizens was worth the tactical risk. Those civilians are now safe within the cathedral, providing labor support for our defense and maintaining morale among the defenders. The strategic objective is more secure with them alive than dead." "That wasn't your decision to make." "You're correct, sir. It wasn't. But I made it anyway." "And you would do it again?" I thought about the priest's trembling hands, about the families clutching each other in the cathedral, about the children who would grow up to remember that Space Marines had saved them. "Yes, Captain, I would." Drusus turned to Hadrius. "Chapter Master, this is grounds for severe disciplinary action, possibly demotion or reassignment to a penal squad." Hadrius had been studying the tactical reports on a data slate. Now he looked up. "Captain Drusus, what are our current defensive force levels?" 200 battle brothers, Chapter Master. "And how many additional personnel do we have supporting the defense?" "Approximately 70,000 civilian refugees, sir." "Refugees that Brother Valen saved, correct?" Drusus's jaw tightened. "Yes, sir." "And what impact have these refugees had on our defensive capabilities?" The captain clearly didn't want to answer, but couldn't lie to the chapter master. "They've provided manual labor for fortification construction, assisted with ammunition distribution, maintained supply lines, and provided intelligence on orc movement patterns from their time in the Pilgrim District. Their presence has increased our defensive efficiency by approximately 15%. So Brother Valen's tactical disobedience actually enhanced our mission success probability." "That's one interpretation, sir." Hadrius set down the data slate. "Brother Valen, step forward." I complied, expecting censure or worse. Instead, Hadrius did something that shocked everyone present. He clasped my arm in a warrior's grip. "What you did was tactically unsound. It violated explicit orders. It contradicted established doctrine." He paused. "It was also brave, compassionate, and ultimately effective. The kind of decision that separates a good warrior from a great leader." "Chapter Master?" Drusus sounded genuinely confused. "The Codex Astartes teaches us principles, Captain. But principles must sometimes bend to reality. Brother Valen understood that reality better than any of us. That an imperium without people is just territory. That faith requires action to remain strong. That the Emperor's angels must sometimes be angels, not just weapons." He released my arm and addressed the room. "Brother-Sergeant Valen will face no disciplinary action. Instead, he is hereby commended for exemplary leadership under combat conditions. Furthermore, all 3 tactical squads involved in the civilian evacuation will receive honor markings." Captain Drusus's expression made it clear he disagreed, but couldn't contradict his chapter master. "As you command, sir." After the meeting, Hadrius pulled me aside once more. "You made enemies today, Tarkus. Brothers who see what you did as weakness, as dangerous precedent." "I know, sir, but you also made allies. Brothers who remember that beneath the ceramite and gene-forged enhancement, we were human once. We felt fear and hope and love. And those feelings, properly channeled, make us stronger. Do you think I did the right thing? I think you did the human thing, which, in this case, turned out to also be the right thing." He smiled. "But don't make a habit of contradicting direct orders. Even I can only protect you so many times." "Understood, Chapter Master." That night, I stood on the cathedral's rampart and looked out over the 70,000 people sleeping in its halls. They'd come seeking the Emperor's blessing and found it in the form of 30 space marines who'd chosen to remember their humanity. Marcus Thorne whispered, "This is why you remember. So someone is willing to make this choice." And for the first time in 12 years, I didn't feel torn between the warrior and the man. I felt complete. Chapter 6: The Cost of Consciousness. The defense of Sanctus Dominus lasted another 4 weeks before reinforcements arrived, and we broke the Orc siege. The Crimson Heralds returned to our fortress monastery as heroes, but I returned as something else, a problem that wouldn't go away. Captain Drusus had been forced to commend me publicly, while privately seething with resentment. Other officers in the chapter began dividing into camps, those who saw my memory retention as an asset versus those who viewed it as a dangerous aberration. The quiet secret that Chapter Master Hadrius and I had maintained was now common knowledge throughout the company. The first incident came during a routine combat drill. Brother Captain Marcus, no relation to my original name, just unfortunate coincidence, paired me against Brother Kaine, a notorious close combat specialist who'd made his distaste for my defect abundantly clear. The drill was supposed to be controlled sparring. Kaine turned it into an attempted execution. He came at me with his training blade like he was trying to kill a demon prince. Every strike aimed at weak points in armor, every movement telegraphing lethal intent. I defended, barely, using everything I'd learned over 12 years to keep him from caving in my skull. "You're weak, Valen," he snarled, driving me back across the training floor. "Your memories make you hesitate, make you soft." "My memories," I grunted, parrying a thrust aimed at my throat, "make me remember why we fight. We fight because we're weapons. We don't need reasons beyond the Emperor's will." He lunged, and I made a decision. I could keep defending, let him exhaust himself, and win through endurance. Or I could show him exactly what a space marine who remembered being human was capable of. I dropped my guard deliberately, letting him think he had an opening. He took it, committing fully to a strike that would have broken 3 ribs. At the last instant, I sidestepped and used his momentum to throw him. All 3 meters and 400 kilos of ceramite-armored Astartes slammed into the training floor hard enough to crack the ferrocrete. Before he could recover, I had my training blade at his throat. "I remember being weaker than this," I said quietly. loudly enough for everyone watching to hear. I remember being afraid, vulnerable, human. Those memories don't make me soft, brother. They make me understand exactly how strong I need to be, so no one else has to feel that way. I pulled back and offered him a hand up. He slapped it away and stormed off the training floor, humiliated. Brother Captain Marcus approached afterward. "That was well done, Sergeant, but you should know, you made an enemy for life just now." "I had an enemy for life before I stepped onto the training floor, sir. At least now he knows I can back up my convictions." The captain nodded thoughtfully. "The chapter is changing, Valen. Slowly. Your actions on Sanctus Dominus have forced many brothers to reconsider what it means to be Astartes. Some will embrace that change, others will resist it with everything they have." "Which side are you on, sir?" He smiled. "The side that wins battles and protects the Imperium. I don't care if you remember your mother's face or can't recall anything before your ascension. I care whether you can shoot straight and lead well. Everything else is theological debate for the chaplains." It was the most pragmatic answer I'd received from a superior officer, and I appreciated the honesty, but the theological debate was coming whether I wanted it or not. Chaplain Matthias summoned me to the Chapel of Fallen Heroes 3 days later. The chaplain was ancient, over 200 years old, his face more scar tissue than skin, his skull-faced helmet a permanent fixture even when not in combat. He represented the chapter's spiritual authority, and his judgment carried weight second only to the chapter master himself. "Brother-Sergeant Valen," he intoned, his voice like gravel in a cement mixer. "Kneel." I knelt before the altar, the stone cold even through my armor's joints. "You retain memories from before your ascension. Memories that should have been purged by the sacred indoctrination. Some call this a gift. Others call it corruption. What do you call it?" I chose my words carefully. "I call it a burden, chaplain, and a responsibility. Elaborate. The memories are a burden because they make every decision harder. I can't simply follow orders without considering the human cost. I can't see civilians as acceptable casualties because I remember being one. Every action requires me to balance the warrior against the man. And the responsibility, someone needs to remember. Someone needs to stand between the Codex's tactical perfection and the reality that we're fighting for people, not territory. If every Space Marine forgets their humanity completely, how long before we start making decisions that serve the Imperium's institutions but destroy its people?" Chaplain Matthias was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight I hadn't expected. "I was born Davos Kern, third son of a Forge World manufacturing supervisor. I remember my father's hands, burned by plasma coils in an industrial accident. I remember my mother singing hymns while she worked. I remember my brothers, my blood brothers, not my battle brothers, and how they died when a reactor malfunction vaporized our hab block." I looked up in shock. The chaplain had never spoken about his past, never given any indication that he retained pre-Astartes memories. "You remember, I am 213 years old, Brother Valen. I remember everything. Every name, every face, every moment before the apothecarian changed me into this." He gestured at his massive, scarred body. "And I have spent 2 centuries asking the same questions you're asking now. What answers did you find? That memory is neither curse nor blessing. It simply is. What matters is what we do with it." He placed a hand on my shoulder. "Some brothers forget and become perfect weapons. That's good. We need perfect weapons. Some brothers remember and become corrupted. That's tragedy. We lose them to doubt or worse. But some brothers remember and become something else. Bridges between the Astartes and humanity. Translators who can speak both languages. Is that what I am? A translator? You're a reminder, Valen. Every time you make a decision based on your memories, you remind your brothers that we fight for something beyond abstract duty. Every time you save civilians instead of treating them as collateral damage, you remind the Imperium that its angels still care about individual human lives." He pulled me to my feet. "But that role is dangerous. You'll always be suspected of weakness, always be tested by brothers who think you're corrupted or incompetent, always be one bad decision away from being proven right or wrong. I know, Chaplain. Do you? Because I've watched 17 battle brothers walk this path before you. 6 died in combat. 4 lost their memories naturally. 5. He paused. 5 were declared corrupted and executed. The number hit me like a bolter round. Executed? By whose order? Chapter Master Hadrius, in every case. He gives brothers like us every chance to prove our worth. But if we ever show signs of true corruption, of using our memories as justification for betraying our oaths, he ends us personally. It's the price we pay for his protection, absolute loyalty in exchange for the freedom to remember. I understand. I hope you do, Brother Sergeant, because the real test isn't combat. It's the quiet moments, the decisions no one sees, the thoughts you have when you're alone and your memories whisper that maybe, just maybe, the Imperium isn't worth serving. I've never thought that. You will, Chaplain Matthias said grimly. Eventually, you'll see something that makes you question everything. All of us do. The question is whether you'll have the strength to maintain your oaths, even when your memories scream at you to break them. I left the chapel with more questions than answers. But I also had something I'd lacked before, the knowledge that I wasn't alone. Chaplain Matthias remembered. Chapter Master Hadrius remembered. We were a small brotherhood within the brotherhood, warriors who carried the weight of 2 identities. The months that followed tested that identity in ways I hadn't anticipated. I led my squad through 6 different campaigns, each one presenting moral complexities that pure tactical doctrine couldn't solve. On Veritas Prime, I negotiated a ceasefire with rebel forces instead of exterminating them, learning that their rebellion was actually resistance to a corrupt planetary governor who'd been embezzling food supplies. On Mordian, I spent 3 days talking down a group of hive gangers who'd been tricked into serving chaos cultists without understanding what they'd actually joined. Each decision alienated more of my brothers while earning grudging respect from others. The chapter was slowly splitting into camps, and I was the fault line. The breaking point came after the Talon campaign. We'd been fighting heretic army units for 8 weeks, and I'd captured a heretic officer for interrogation. During questioning, I learned he'd been forcibly conscripted, his family taken hostage and tortured until he agreed to serve the enemy. By imperial law, he was a traitor, deserving only execution. By Marcus's morality, he was a victim forced into an impossible choice. I recommended mercy and rehabilitation. Captain Drusus recommended immediate execution. The argument escalated until we were both standing before Chapter Master Hadrius again. This heretic chose to serve the enemies of mankind, Drusus argued. His motivations are irrelevant. The penalty for heresy is death. He was coerced through violence against his family, I countered. He's as much a victim as an offender. Executing him sends a message that the Imperium doesn't distinguish between willing traitors and broken men. We are not social workers, Valen. We are weapons of the Emperor. We are also symbols of the Emperor's justice, and justice requires discernment. Hadrius held up a hand for silence. Brother Valen, if we grant mercy to this heretic, how many others will claim coercion? How many genuine traitors will hide behind the excuse of family pressure? It was the question I'd been dreading. Because he was right. Mercy could be exploited. Compassion could become weakness. The Codex existed for a reason. But Marcus whispered, if we execute every victim along with every villain, we become the evil we're fighting. Chapter Master, I said slowly, I can't guarantee others won't exploit mercy, but I can guarantee that executing this man will prove to watching populations that the Imperium treats victims and villains identically. That will drive more people into Chaos's arms than one heretic's testimony could ever achieve. Hadrius studied me for a long moment. Then he surprised everyone. The heretic will be granted clemency and assigned to a penal work battalion. Brother Valen will file a detailed report on this case to serve as a precedent guide for future similar situations. Chapter Master, this sets a dangerous precedent, Drusus protested. So does executing everyone who crosses our path, Captain. Dismissed. I'd won the argument, but I'd also drawn a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I was officially the voice of mercy in a chapter built on holy violence. The question was how long I could maintain that position before something broke. The chapter, my reputation, or me. Chapter 7. The Memory Bearer. 5 years passed. 5 years of campaigns across a dozen worlds, of victories measured in enemy casualties and territories reclaimed. 5 years of walking the razor's edge between two identities, while the chapter slowly adapted to having a space marine who openly admitted to remembering his humanity. I was 37 standard years old now, 23 years past my original recruitment. Marcus Thorne would have been 37, probably working in the manufactorums of Hive Tertius, maybe married, maybe with children of his own. Sometimes I wondered what that life would have looked like. Then I remembered why it never happened. Because the Imperium needed weapons more than it needed families. My role in the chapter had evolved in unexpected ways. Officially, I commanded Tactical Squad Primus and served as one of 4th Company's senior sergeants. Unofficially, I'd become what Chaplain Morteus had predicted, a translator, a bridge. When planetary governors needed to negotiate with Space Marines, they requested me because I could speak their language without making them feel like insects before gods. When Imperial Guard commanders needed coordination with Astartes units, they asked for my squad because we understood logistics and morale in ways pure tactical doctrine didn't capture. When civilian populations needed to be evacuated or protected, I was the first sergeant assigned. It made me valuable. It also made me vulnerable. Brother Kaine, the warrior I'd humiliated in the training cage years before, had risen to sergeant rank himself. He commanded Assault Squad Vengeance, and he'd built a reputation for brutal efficiency and zero tolerance for what he called humanitarian weakness. He openly challenged my methods in tactical briefings, questioned my recommendations, and made sure everyone knew he viewed memory retention as incompatible with Astartes' purity. The confrontation I'd been dreading came during the Siege of Hades Junction. We were defending an industrial nexus against a word-bearer's assault. The Heretic Legion had brought 30 Chaos Space Marines and 10,000 cultist auxiliaries, and they'd punched through the outer defenses faster than expected. The civilian population, 300,000 workers and their families, were trapped in the central hab complexes with no evacuation route. The tactical situation was crystal clear. We couldn't hold both the industrial nexus and evacuate the civilians. We had to choose one or the other, or Captain Drusus made the Codex-approved decision. All squads fall back to the industrial nexus. Establish defensive perimeter. Hold at all costs. Captain, request permission to take 2 squads and secure an evacuation route for the civilians, I said immediately. Denied. We cannot divide our forces against Chaos Space Marines. Sir, 300,000 people will die if we don't. Those people are already dead, Sergeant Valen. Our objective is the industrial nexus. Its strategic value outweighs civilian casualties. Brother Kaine's voice cut across the command channel. Finally, a tactical decision not corrupted by sentiment. Brother Valen, perhaps you'll learn that war requires hard choices. I switched to the chapter master's direct channel. Sir, requesting command override. Denied, Sergeant. Captain Drusus's assessment is tactically sound. But, I said denied, brother. Follow your orders. I'd never felt the weight of my oaths more heavily. Every oath I'd sworn said obey. Every memory I carried said act. The two identities that had coexisted for 23 years suddenly seemed incompatible. We established the defensive perimeter. We prepared to hold the industrial nexus. And we listened to 300,000 people die over the Vox channels as the word-bearers butchered them systematically. The sounds haunted my dreams for weeks afterward. Children crying for parents who couldn't help them. Men and women praying to an emperor who didn't save them. The wet, final sounds of chainswords doing their work. I completed the mission, held the line, defeated the word-bearers when they finally assaulted our position. It was a perfect tactical victory. The industrial nexus remained in Imperial hands, its strategic value preserved. And I had followed orders while 300,000 people died screaming. The victory celebration in the fortress monastery felt like attending my own funeral. My brothers congratulated each other on a successful defense. Chapter Master Hadrius commended our discipline. Captain Drusus personally thanked Brother Kaine for his leadership of the assault squads. I stood alone in the Hall of Remembrance afterward, staring at the names of fallen brothers carved into marble walls. "You're angry," Chaplain Matthias said, appearing beside me like a sculled ghost. "I'm furious." "At whom?" "Everyone. Myself, the Codex, the Emperor. Take your pick." That's the test I warned you about. The moment when your memories make you question everything. 300,000 people, Chaplain. 300,000. And we could have saved at least half of them if we'd tried. Could we? Would dividing our forces against Chaos Space Marines have resulted in mission success? Or would we have lost both the civilians and the industrial nexus? I don't know, I admitted, but I would have tried. And that impulse, that willingness to try even when the odds are against you, is both your greatest strength and your greatest weakness. He placed a hand on my shoulder. "Brother Valen, do you know why Chapter Master Hadrius denied your request?" "Because the Codex said so." "No, because he knew if he approved it and you failed, the entire chapter would see it as proof that your memories make you tactically unsound. He protected you by forcing you to follow orders." The realization felt like being punched in the chest. He let 300,000 people die to protect my reputation. He let 300,000 people die because that was the correct tactical decision. But he ensured you wouldn't be the one blamed for attempting an impossible rescue that would have gotten you and your squad killed. I turned to face the chaplain. "How do you live with it? 200 years of this. 200 years of making these choices. By remembering that individual battles don't define the war. We lost 300,000 people at Hades Junction, but by holding that industrial nexus, we secured the munition supply for 3 Imperial Guard regiments that will save millions of lives in future campaigns. The calculus is brutal, but it's real." That's the Codex talking. No, that's Davos Kern talking. The boy who watched his family die in a reactor accident while safety inspectors were bribed to ignore obvious flaws. I remember that boy. I remember his rage at a system that valued profit over people, and I used that rage to fuel my determination to protect as many people as the Imperium will allow me to save. How many is that? Not enough. It's never enough. But it's more than 0, and in this galaxy, that has to be sufficient. We stood in silence for a long time. Finally, I asked the question that had been eating at me. Am I making a difference? Really? Or am I just a space marine with a unique dysfunction that occasionally results in positive outcomes? "You're making a difference," a new voice said. Chapter. Master Hadrius emerged from the shadows. How long had he been listening? "You want proof? Follow me." He led us to his private sanctum and activated a holo display. It showed statistical data spanning the past 5 years, mission success rates, civilian casualty reports, post-operation loyalty assessments from planetary governors. "These are the metrics for operations involving your tactical recommendations," Hadrius explained. Mission success rate, 93%, 7 points above chapter average. Civilian casualties, 42% below chapter average. Post-operation loyalty assessments, rated excellent in 78% of cases versus chapter average of 51%. He zoomed in on specific data points. Every time you modify tactics to reduce civilian casualties, you create populations that view the Astartes as protectors rather than necessary evils. Those populations resist heresy more effectively, cooperate with Imperial authorities more readily, and produce higher quality recruits for the Imperial Guard. So I'm effective. You're highly effective at a specific type of warfare. Asymmetric conflicts where civilian loyalty determines victory. You're less effective, though still competent, at pure military operations like Hades Junction, where civilian considerations complicate the tactical picture. Then why assign me to Hades Junction at all? To remind you that your approach isn't universal, that sometimes the Codex's mathematical brutality is correct, even when it feels wrong. Hadrius deactivated the display. Brother Valen, you asked if you're making a difference. The answer is yes. But you need to accept that you can't save everyone. No one can, not even the Emperor himself. How do you accept that? By saving everyone you can and refusing to let the ones you can't save destroy you. He gestured at the data. You've saved tens of thousands of lives through your modifications to standard doctrine. You've created loyalty in populations that would otherwise be vulnerable to heresy. You've proven that Space Marines can be weapons and protectors. But 300,000 people died because chaos exists. Hadrius interrupted firmly. Not because you failed to save them. Not because the Codex is flawed. Because this galaxy is a nightmare where good people die despite our best efforts. You want to honor them. Use their deaths to fuel your determination to save the next population. And the next. And the next. It was the most human speech I'd ever heard from a chapter master. Marcus and Tarkus aligned in that moment, both identities accepting the same terrible truth. We lived in a universe where tragedy was inevitable, but defiance was still possible. I understand, chapter master. Do you? Because I'm about to give you an assignment that will test whether you really mean that. He pulled up new orders on the holo display. I'm promoting you to captain of the 4th Company. Captain Drusus is being transferred to command the 3rd Company. You'll be responsible for 100 battle brothers and all tactical decisions for 4th Company operations. I stared at the orders, barely processing them. Sir, I'm only 37. There are sergeants with decades more experience, and none of them have your specific skill set. You're the most effective officer we have for the types of conflicts the Imperium faces most frequently: asymmetric warfare, counterinsurgency, civilian protection operations. He met my eyes. But this promotion comes with a warning. You'll be exposed to politics at a level you've never experienced. Other captains will question your methods. The chapter council will scrutinize your every decision, and you'll be responsible for deaths that occur because of orders you gave. I accept, chapter master. Then kneel. I knelt. Chaplain Morteus approached, carrying the trappings of a company captain. A master-crafted power sword, a relic bolt pistol, and the crimson cloak marked with the company's honors. Do you swear to command 4th Company with wisdom and courage? Hadrius intoned. I swear it. Do you swear to honor the Codex Astartes while adapting to the realities of war? I swear it. Do you swear to remember your humanity while never letting it compromise your duty? The final oath was personal, created just for me. Marcus and Tarkus answered together. I swear it. Then rise, Captain Valen, and show the Imperium what a Space Marine who remembers can truly accomplish. I rose, and for the first time in 23 years, I felt like I'd finally found where I belonged. Chapter 8. The Legacy of Memory. 20 more years passed. 20 years of command, of victories and defeats, of difficult decisions that never got easier. I was 57 standard years old, ancient by civilian standards, but still young for an Astartes. My armor bore the scars of 100 battles. My face had gained its share of augmetic replacements, and my legend had grown beyond anything Marcus Thorne could have imagined. 4th Company, under my command, had become known throughout the chapter and beyond as the Remembrance Company. It was meant as an insult at first, a mocking reference to my retained memories, but we turned it into an identity. My captains and sergeants were selected not just for tactical skill, but for their ability to balance martial excellence with humanitarian awareness. We took the difficult assignments, the ones where civilian populations hung in the balance, where the difference between victory and tragedy came down to whether warriors could remember what they were fighting for. Our success rate spoke for itself. In 20 years, 4th Company had conducted over 200 operations across 50 worlds. We'd lost 37 brothers, each name carved into my memory as permanently as into marble. but we'd saved millions of civilian lives and prevented countless populations from falling to heresy. The Imperium noticed. I received a summons from Segmentum Command, requesting my presence to brief Astra Militarum commanders on civilian-oriented warfare doctrines. Chapter Master Hadrius authorized my departure with a knowing smile. "You're going to shake things up, Captain. Try not to start any theological wars." The briefing took place on the fortress world of Cadia. This was before its fall, when it still stood as the Imperium's shield against the Eye of Terror. I stood before 50 guard commanders, each one responsible for millions of soldiers, and explained what I'd learned over 43 years of service. "The Codex Astartes teaches us that civilians are strategic assets," I began. "But we often forget what that means in practical terms. Assets aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They're populations with needs, fears, and loyalties that shift based on how they're treated." I brought up holo displays showing comparative data. When guard units prioritize civilian protection during campaigns, post-conflict heresy rates drop by an average of 67%. When units treat civilians as expendable, heresy rates increase by an average of 42%. The mathematics are clear. Protected populations remain loyal. Abandoned populations turn to chaos. A guard commander, Lord General Castor, a veteran of the Gothic War, raised his hand. "With respect, Captain, the Astra Militarum doesn't have the luxury of your surgical precision. We fight with millions of soldiers, not hundreds of transhuman warriors. Civilian casualties are inevitable." "I'm not suggesting zero casualties, General. I'm suggesting that minimizing civilian casualties should be a tactical priority rather than an afterthought. Every civilian you save is a potential guard recruit. Every family you protect is a future manufacturer worker. Every population you defend is a fortress against heresy." Another commander spoke up. "You're asking us to fight with one hand tied behind our backs." "No, sir. I'm asking you to fight smarter. To understand that long-term Imperial stability requires populations that believe the Imperium protects them, not just uses them as ablative shields." The debate raged for hours. Some commanders embraced the concepts enthusiastically. Others viewed them as naive idealism from a space marine who'd never commanded millions of regular humans. But the data was undeniable, and slowly, grudgingly, they began to see the strategic value in my approach. Lord General Castor approached me afterward. "Captain Valen, your methods are unorthodox for an Astartes. How did you develop them?" I made a decision in that moment, a risky one, but necessary. I remember being a civilian general. I remember what it's like to be weak and afraid and dependent on warriors who seemed like gods. Those memories inform every tactical decision I make. His eyes widened. "You retained memories through the psycho-indoctrination." "Yes, sir. And I've spent 43 years proving that remembering our humanity makes us better protectors, not worse warriors." That's remarkable. And possibly heretical, depending on who you ask. "The Inquisition has investigated me 4 times, sir. Each time they've concluded that my effectiveness outweighs any theological concerns." I met his eyes. "The question isn't whether my memories are proper. It's whether the Imperium benefits from having warriors who understand what they're protecting." He nodded slowly. "I think I understand why your chapter master let you brief us. You're not just teaching tactics, you're teaching philosophy." "I'm teaching survival, General. The Imperium has enemies on every front. If we turn our own populations against us through callousness and brutality, we're doing chaos's work for them." The briefing had consequences I hadn't anticipated. Within a year, 3 different guard regiments had adopted modified operational doctrines based on my recommendations. Within 5 years, the concept of civilian-oriented warfare had become a legitimate tactical school taught at officer academies across the Segmentum. Within 10 years, I was receiving requests to train guard commanders and even PDF officers in these methods. I became more than a space marine. I became a teacher, a philosopher, a voice arguing that the Imperium could be brutal and compassionate simultaneously, that the Emperor's vision included protecting his people, not just using them as ammunition. But success breeds enemies. Inquisitor Covenant of the Ordo Hereticus arrived at the Crimson Herald's Fortress Monastery on the day of my 57th birthday. She wore the rosette openly and brought a retinue of 24 stormtroopers. Chapter Master Hadrius met her in the Great Hall with the full chapter council present. "Inquisitor," he said formally, "your presence honors us." "I'm here to investigate Captain Tarkus Valen," she announced without preamble. "I have evidence suggesting his retained memories constitute a potential vector for heretical corruption." The hall went silent. I stood from my position among the captains and stepped forward. "I am Captain Valen, Inquisitor. I submit to your investigation willingly." "Of course you do. That's what a loyal servant would say. It's also what a clever heretic would say." She spent 3 weeks at the Fortress Monastery. She reviewed every mission report I'd filed, interviewed brothers who'd served under my command, examined my personal journals. Yes, I kept journals, another quirk that made me suspect. She even subjected me to psychic interrogation by her astropath, diving into my memories to search for taint. What she found surprised her. "Your mind is remarkable," she admitted after the interrogation. "You maintain 2 distinct identity structures, your original civilian personality and your Astartes conditioning, and somehow prevent them from creating cognitive dissonance or vulnerability to psychic influence. It's like you've built a fortress inside your own consciousness." "Is that heretical, Inquisitor?" "That depends. Show me why you remember. Take me through a mission where your memories mattered." I took her to the shrine world of Sanctus Dominus, now rebuilt and thriving 32 years after the Orc siege I'd helped defend. The pilgrim district we'd saved was now a memorial garden, with 70,000 names carved into stone. Every civilian we'd evacuated that day. An elderly woman was tending the garden. She looked up as we approached, and her eyes widened with recognition. "Captain Valen? Is that... Oh, Emperor, it really is you." I knelt so she could see my face better. "I remember you," I said gently. "You were carrying a child during the evacuation, a little girl with dark hair." She began to cry. "That was my granddaughter. She's 32 now, married, working as a medici. She wouldn't exist if you hadn't saved us that day." "I was doing my duty, honored mother." "No," she said firmly. "You were doing more than duty. You were being human, being kind." She looked at Inquisitor Covenant. "This man is a saint. Don't you dare persecute him." Covenant studied the memorial garden, read the names, watched the grateful population moving through a city that existed because I disobeyed orders. Then she turned to me. "Captain Valen, I'm closing my investigation with a finding of loyal and exemplary. Your methods are unorthodox, but they serve the Emperor's will. Continue your work." "Thank you, Inquisitor. But Captain, if you ever do show signs of corruption, if your memories ever lead you to betray your oaths, I will return, and I will end you personally." "Understood, Inquisitor. I'd expect nothing less." She departed the next day, leaving me with official inquisitorial approval. The validation changed everything. Suddenly, I wasn't just a curiosity or a controversial figure. I was a proven method, an example that could be followed. The Crimson Heralds began identifying aspirants who showed signs of memory retention rather than trying to eliminate it. Not all of them. Most still went through standard psycho-indoctrination, but enough to create a cadre of brothers who could work alongside civilians without frightening them. Other chapters began requesting consultations, asking about our training methods and tactical doctrines. Chapter Master Hadrius, now nearing the end of his 2nd century of service, called me to his sanctum for a final conversation. "I'm stepping down, Tarkus. Age and wounds are finally catching up to me. The chapter council will select my replacement within the month." "You've served with honor, Chapter Master. The chapter owes you everything." "The chapter owes you, Captain. You've proven that Space Marines can evolve, that we can be weapons and protectors simultaneously." He placed a hand on my shoulder. "I'm recommending you as my successor." "Chapter Master, I'm too young. You're 57 years old, and have more tactical experience than any other captain in the chapter. You've trained guard commanders, survived inquisitorial investigation, and proven that unconventional methods can work. You're exactly what the chapter needs for its future. But the council will never approve. 6 of the 8 council members have already expressed support for your nomination. Even Captain Kaine, your old rival, admits you're the most qualified candidate. He smiled. You've won, Tarkus, not through politics or manipulation, but through competence and courage. Accept the honor you've earned. The chapter council voted 3 days later. 7 votes in favor, 1 abstention. I was declared chapter master-elect of the Crimson Heralds, pending the formal ceremony. On the day of my investiture, I stood in the Chapel of Heroes and looked out at 300 battle brothers kneeling before me. Behind them, through the chapel's viewports, I could see the fortress monastery's training fields, where I'd first struggled with the weight of my dual identity 43 years ago. Brothers, I said, my voice amplified through the chapel's Vox system. I stand before you as proof that we can be more than weapons. We can be warriors who remember why we fight, protectors who understand what we protect, angels who never forget we were human once. I drew the chapter master's ceremonial sword. I swear to command this chapter with wisdom and courage, to honor the Codex Astartes while adapting to war's realities, and to never, ever forget that beneath our ceramite and gene-forged enhancement, we serve humanity because we were human first. The chapel erupted in a thunderous response. For the Emperor, for humanity, for the Crimson Heralds. And in that moment, Marcus Thorn and Tarkus Valen finally became one person. Not civilian or Astartes, but both. A warrior who remembered, a weapon that cared, a space marine who proved that forgetting your humanity wasn't strength, remembering it was. That evening, I stood alone in the fortress monastery's highest tower and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, on dozens of worlds I'd saved, people were living their lives because I'd chosen to disobey orders, to prioritize compassion over cold tactics, to remember what every other space marine forgot. My mother's voice echoed across decades. We're only human if we help each other, Marcus. I helped them, Mom, I whispered to the stars. I'm still helping them, and I'll keep helping them until the day I die. The Imperium would continue to be brutal and unforgiving. War would remain terrible and tragic. Billions would die in ways I couldn't prevent. But some would live because I remembered. Some would be saved because one space marine refused to forget his humanity. And in a galaxy defined by darkness, that small light of memory might be the most powerful weapon humanity had. From the personal journal of Chapter Master Tarkus Valen, Crimson Herald's year 43 of my service, 78 standard years of age. I still remember Marcus Thorn, every detail, every moment, every laugh that sounded like bells. My little sister Arya would be 62 now, if she's still alive. I've never tried to find her. It would be a distraction, a weakness, a vulnerability. But I hope she's lived a good life, that someone protected her the way I protected 70,000 pilgrims on Sanctus Dominus. Tonight, a new batch of aspirants arrived. 14 boys, aged 10 to 14, taken from worlds across the sector. They're terrified, confused, not yet understanding what they're about to become. Tomorrow, they begin the psycho-indoctrination. Most will forget their old names within weeks, but 1 or 2 might remember, might carry their humanity into the Astartes transformation like I did. And if they do, I'll be here to guide them, to show them that remembering isn't weakness, that memories can be strength, that the Emperor's angels can protect humanity while still being human themselves. This is my legacy, not the battles won or enemies slain, but the proof that Space Marines can evolve, that we can be more than the Codex intended, that we can remember, someone has to. 5 years after Tarkus Valen's ascension to Chapter Master, the young aspirant stood before me in my sanctum, his eyes red from crying. His name was Delta 97 according to his designation, but I'd already read his file. I knew his real name, Alexis Kaine, from the hive world of Mortuus Prime. 14 standard years old, 7 months into psycho-indoctrination, 23 sessions attempted, 0 successful memory suppressions. He was me 48 years ago. Chapter Master, he said, his voice trembling. I can't forget. They keep trying, but I remember everything. My mother, my father, my brother who died in the Underhive gangs. I remember everything. I gestured for him to sit. He did, looking small and vulnerable in a way that aspirants weren't supposed to look. The chair dwarfed him. It was built for a full Astartes, not a partially augmented 14-year-old who still carried the weight of 2 identities. Tell me what you remember right now, I said gently. I remember my brother's name, Cassian. He was 16 when he died. Got caught in a gang war over water rations. I found his body in the sump tunnels. His voice cracked. I remember holding him while he bled out. He told me to be strong, to survive, to make something of myself. And you think remembering that makes you weak? The apothecaries say it does. They say I'm defective, that a proper Astartes doesn't carry civilian attachments. I stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the Fortress Monastery's training grounds. Aspirant Delta 97, do you know how many brothers in this chapter retain pre-Astartes memories? No, Chapter Master. 23. Out of 947 battle brothers, 23 of us remember who we were before the augmentation. That's roughly 2.4%. I turned to face him. Do you know what our average mission success rate is compared to the rest of the chapter? He shook his head. 17% higher. Our combat effectiveness is identical, but our ability to interact with civilian populations, anticipate human behavior, and maintain imperial loyalty in conquered territories far exceeds the chapter average. I walked back and knelt so I was at his eye level. Aspirant, your memories aren't a defect, they're a specialization. But the Codex Astartes. The Codex Astartes was written by Robout Guilliman 10,000 years ago. He was brilliant, but he couldn't anticipate every variation in the Astartes creation process. Some of us are built differently. Our neural architecture resists standard psycho-indoctrination, not because we're weak, but because we're wired for a different purpose. I placed a hand on his shoulder. Alexis Kaine, you will become an Astartes. The augmentation will continue. You'll receive all 19 organs, all the training, all the conditioning, but you'll do it while keeping your brother's memory alive. And that memory will make you a better warrior, not a worse one. Tears streamed down his face. How do you know? Because I'm like you. My name was Marcus Thorn before I became Tarkus Valen. I remember my mother's death, my little sister's laugh, every moment of a life that was supposed to be erased. I helped him stand. And those memories have made me the chapter master of the Crimson Heralds. They've let me save millions of lives that cold tactical doctrine would have sacrificed. They've proven that humanity isn't weakness, it's our greatest strength. What do I do now? You endure. You let the apothecaries continue their work, but you don't fight your memories. You integrate them. Learn to be both Alexis Kaine and your future Astartes identity simultaneously. It will be hard, harder than what your fellow aspirants face, but you'll emerge stronger because of it. Will you help me? Every step of the way. You're not alone anymore, Alexis. You have 23 brothers who understand exactly what you're going through, and will make sure you succeed. He left my sanctum with his shoulders straighter, his eyes clearer. I watched him go and felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Hope for the future. 10 years after Tarkus Valen's ascension, the Conclave of Chapter Masters convened on Holy Terror itself, a gathering that occurred once per century to discuss the state of the Adeptus Astartes and the Imperium at large. I stood among legends, Chapter Master Dante of the Blood Angels, over 1,500 years old. Chapter Master Grimnar of the Space Wolves, his savage nobility undimmed by centuries. Chapter Master Calgar of the Ultramarines, keeper of Guilliman's legacy. They all knew who I was. The chapter master who remembered. The controversial leader who turned the Crimson Heralds into something unorthodox yet effective. The discussion turned to recruitment and training protocols. Several chapters reported increasing failure rates in the psycho-indoctrination process. More aspirants were dying during the memory suppression phase, their minds unable to handle the brutal erasure of their previous lives. The solution is stricter selection criteria, Chapter Master Corax of the Raven Guard argued. We must identify and eliminate candidates with strong pre-existing memory structures before augmentation begins. With respect, I said, my voice cutting through the chamber. That's exactly the wrong approach. Every eye turned to me. I felt the weight of their judgment, their skepticism. Who was I, barely 60 years a chapter master, to contradict warriors who'd led for centuries? Explain yourself, Chapter Master Valen, Dante said. His voice was ancient, patient, genuinely curious. The aspirants who resist memory suppression aren't failures. They're candidates for a different operational specialization. The Imperium faces threats on countless fronts, but the most dangerous aren't always military. Heresy spreads through populations. Chaos corrupts through social vectors. Xenos infiltrate by exploiting human psychology. I stood, addressing the assembled chapter masters directly. Space Marines who retain civilian memories understand these threats in ways pure warriors cannot. We can anticipate how populations will react to Imperial policies. We can identify early signs of cultural corruption. We can interact with civilians without terrifying them into compliance that breeds resentment and eventual heresy. You're suggesting we deliberately preserve memory in some aspirants? Chapter Master Calgar sounded skeptical, but not dismissive. I'm suggesting we stop treating memory retention as a defect and start treating it as a tactical asset. Create specialized training protocols for memory-retaining Astartes. Deploy them in operations requiring civilian interaction. Let them become bridges between the Adeptus Astartes and the humanity we protect. This violates the spirit of the Codex Astartes, someone objected. Does it? I pulled up a holo-display showing 40 years of my chapter's operational data. The Codex teaches us to adapt tactics to circumstances, to be the Emperor's sword and shield. My chapter's memory-retaining brothers have proven that remembering humanity makes us better shields for humanity. The debate raged for hours. Some chapter masters viewed my proposal as dangerous revisionism. Others saw strategic merit. But slowly, gradually, the tide shifted. Chapter Master Dante, the eldest among us, finally spoke. I have led the Blood Angels for over 15 centuries. I remember every brother I've lost, every battle, every victory and defeat. But I don't remember the name I bore before I became Astartes. I don't remember my family or my original life. He paused. Perhaps that's a loss I never recognized until now. The chamber went silent. Chapter Master Valen's methods are unorthodox, Dante continued, but the data supports his conclusions. I propose we authorize experimental programs in willing chapters to identify and train memory-retaining Astartes as specialists. Let results determine doctrine, not tradition. The vote was close, 17 chapters in favor, 13 against, 8 abstaining, but it passed. As the conclave ended, Chapter Master Grimnar of the Space Wolves approached me. His massive frame and wolf-pelt cloak made him look more beast than man, but his eyes held ancient wisdom. We wolves have always remembered, he said gruffly. Our chapter never fully embraced the memory suppression protocols. We keep our names, our histories, our saga lines. He clasped my arm. It's good to see other chapters learning what we've known for 10,000 years, that warriors who remember what they fight for are the most dangerous warriors of all. Thank you, Chapter Master. Don't thank me yet, pup. You've started something that will reshape the Adeptus Astartes. That makes you either a visionary or a heretic. History will decide which. He grinned, showing fangs. But I think I know which it'll be. 20 years after Tarkus Valen's ascension, I was 98 standard years old when Alexis Kaine, now Captain Alexis Kaine of 5th Company, led his first independent operation. He'd grown into everything I'd hoped: a skilled warrior who never forgot his brother's dying words, a tactical genius who understood human psychology, a leader who inspired loyalty in both Astartes and civilians. His mission was a counter-insurgency operation on the agri-world of Verdania. Chaos cultists had infiltrated the farming communities, spreading heresy through promises of abundance and power. Standard doctrine called for orbital bombardment of infected regions, followed by mass executions to root out corruption. Captain Kaine chose a different path. He spent 3 months embedded in the farming communities, living among the people, learning their grievances and fears. He discovered the cult had gained followers not through malice but through desperation. A corrupt planetary governor had seized so much of the harvest for tithes that families were starving. Rather than execute thousands of desperate farmers who turned to chaos out of hunger, Kaine arrested the governor, redistributed the stolen food supplies, and personally hunted down the cult leadership. 27 heretics died. 40,000 farmers were saved from starvation and returned to imperial loyalty. The operation became a case study in the training protocols for memory-retaining Astartes. Within a decade, 73 chapters had requested consultation on implementing similar programs. The Imperium was slowly learning what I'd spent a lifetime proving: that remembering humanity made Space Marines more effective, not less. But success always comes with a price. Inquisitor Covenant returned to the Fortress Monastery, older now, but no less sharp. She'd been monitoring the spread of memory retention programs across multiple chapters. Chapter Master Valen, we need to talk about scale. I received her in my sanctum, offering her a seat and a glass of Amasec that she actually accepted this time. "You've created a movement," she said bluntly. 73 chapters are now experimenting with memory retention. That's 7% of all Adeptus Astartes chapters in the Imperium. Do you understand the theological implications? I understand that we're more effective at protecting the Emperor's people. You're also more vulnerable to certain forms of corruption. A Space Marine who remembers his family can be blackmailed through threats to that family. A warrior who retains emotional attachments can be manipulated through those attachments. You've created a weakness in the Adeptus Astartes armor. We've created a strength, I countered. Every memory-retaining brother in my chapter has been psychically screened quarterly for 40 years. 0 chaos corruption, 0 heretical deviation, 0 betrayals. The data is clear, Inquisitor. For now. But what happens in another century, another millennium? What happens when the first memory-retaining chapter master falls to chaos and uses his understanding of human psychology to corrupt entire sectors? It was the nightmare scenario I'd feared since becoming chapter master. Because she was right. The same abilities that made us effective protectors could make us devastating traitors. Then we maintain eternal vigilance, I said quietly. We screen harder, monitor closer, accept that this path requires more oversight than traditional Astartes. But we don't abandon it because of theoretical risks, when actual results prove its value. She studied me for a long moment. You're gambling with the Imperium's security. The Imperium is already gambling. Every Space Marine created is a risk. Every weapon of such power could potentially turn against its creators. We manage that risk through loyalty, conditioning, and faith. Memory retention doesn't change that calculation. It just adds a different variable. A variable that could destroy everything you've built, or save everything the Imperium is supposed to stand for. I met her eyes. Inquisitor, I'm 98 years old. I won't live forever. But this work will continue after I'm gone, because it's right. Because the Imperium needs warriors who remember that they're protecting people, not abstract concepts. She finished her Amasec and stood. I'll be watching, Chapter Master. Always watching. The moment memory retention shows signs of widespread corruption, I'll advocate for its immediate termination across all chapters. I wouldn't expect anything less. That's your duty. And protecting humanity is yours. She paused at the door. For what it's worth, I hope you're right. I hope memory makes you stronger. Because if it doesn't, the consequences will be apocalyptic. After she left, I stood at my viewport and looked out at the Fortress Monastery's training grounds. 40 aspirants were drilling below, their movements already showing the enhanced coordination of Astartes augmentation. 3 of them, I could tell from their body language, their slight hesitations, their careful awareness, were memory retainers. They would face challenges their brothers wouldn't. They would carry burdens others couldn't understand. They would walk the razor's edge between 2 identities for their entire lives, but they would also save lives that doctrine would sacrifice. They would prevent heresy that cold tactics would miss. They would be the Emperor's angels in ways that pure warriors could never achieve. And somewhere in the void between stars, Marcus Thorne smiled. Because the boy from Hive Tertius, who'd held his dying mother's hand, had grown into a chapter master, who'd changed the Adeptus Astartes forever, and his legacy would endure for as long as warriors remembered why they fought. Final transmission from Chapter Master Tarkus Valen to all memory-retaining Astartes across the Imperium, encrypted and distributed through approved channels. Brothers, if you're receiving this, you are one of us. You remember, you carry 2 identities, the civilian child you were and the transhuman warrior you've become. You know the burden, you know the strength, you know that every day is a battle to maintain the balance. I'm recording this at 98 years of age, knowing my time grows short. Battle wounds accumulate. Even our enhanced bodies fail eventually. But before I fall, I want to leave you with the wisdom earned through nearly a century of service. First, your memories are not weakness. They are precision instruments. Use them. Second, you will be doubted, questioned, suspected. Endure it. Let results speak louder than accusations. Third, never forget that you serve humanity, not the administratum, not the machinery of the Imperium, the actual human beings who wake each day and struggle to survive in this nightmare galaxy. Fourth, stay vigilant against corruption. Our memories make us vulnerable in ways others aren't. Accept that vulnerability and guard against it constantly. Fifth, find each other. Build networks of understanding. You cannot survive this path alone. And finally, remember why you remember. The Emperor made us to be weapons, yes, but he made us from humanity to protect humanity. We are the bridge, the translators, the warriors who never forget what we're fighting for. Carry that burden with pride, for the Emperor, for humanity, for all those who cannot remember themselves. Chapter Master Tarkus Valen. The Crimson Heralds. In the 98th year of my service, and the 44th year since I chose to stay human veil, brothers. And remember,